My name is Joan Mummert. I'm President and CEO of the York County Heritage Trust, and I welcome you here today for the opening of Front Porch to Front Lines. We know it's Flag Day, and we're very excited about that because we understand the Elks actually started Flag Day, and they're represented here today. And we also know it is the Army's birthday as well. So have lots of reasons to celebrate, and I thank you all for coming. Without any further ado, I would like to introduce you to Ron Herman, who's the chairman of the Joint Veterans Council. He served in the Army in Korea and Vietnam, and he has some official duties for us.
If you're able to, please rise for the presentation of the colors. Remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Retire the colors.
All right, colors. Ready? Cut. Left wheel. March.
Please be seated or relax. I'd just like to say that it is an honor to be here for the opening of the Veterans Exhibit here in York County. It's been long overdue, and I think that everyone who worked on this project did a real good job. It's very professional when you see the exhibit, and I'd just like to say enjoy your day, and if you have any questions, ask one of us who are former military. We're still military, but former active duty military. And we're proud to be here and proud to serve that we've served our country, and we're proud to be Americans. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. I want to thank Lieutenant Colonel Ernst and the Dallas Town Junior ROTC for their assistance this morning in getting us started. I have a few quick introductions to do. I want to acknowledge our county commissioners who are here. Chris Riley is where I saw him. There he is. Behind the case. Doug Hope, I saw Doug, and President Commissioner Steve Cronister. Thank you. Representing Congressman Platz's office, Lisa Flanagan, over there with the flag, and Sarah Haefenfuss, who is an intern, we understand. Thank you for representing the office. From State Representative Eugene D. Pasquale's office, Hannah Michael, who is a legislative assistant, and Ryan McNeely, who is an intern. And is Brenda Arnold here? Brenda, welcome from State Senator Mike Waugh's office. Thank you. Before I get too much farther into thank yous and acknowledgments, we want to talk a little bit about the exhibit itself. I'm going to invite Dan Rowe, who is the Director of Education, to come up who represents the exhibit team and say a few words.
I know for myself, as well as many of the staff, this project has been one of the most unique we have ever worked on in our career in the public history field. Historians in the field of history in general typically delves into personalities, objects, stories, of course, from the past, no longer here, but they typically serve as simple reminders. However, with Front Porch to Front Lines, this provided a different context for many of us. Many of us engaged with local veterans to hear their heartfelt stories from the front, families who experienced war at home and contributed in many ways. Our collections and artifacts on display, from letters home, medals that highlight awe-inspiring stories of service and loyalty, to the actual materials that soldiers carried, created instant and powerful connections to the past. I know that I have personally learned so much in working on this exhibit. It has not been military history, but instead quite a bit about people, life, family, and the community. As an organization, we have strived to offer the latest in museum practices with this exhibit, share York County's story, and provide an opportunity for the local community to embrace and discover this heritage even further, both within our walls and outside of them. It is my hope that this exhibit will both give visitors a meaningful experience of reflection, as well as inspiring them to understand their own community's contribution to the world. I'd like to thank everyone who's assisted with the entire project, and thank you for everyone coming out today. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. Front Porch to Front Lines, York County Goes to War, vividly captures World War I, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. The stories, the personal stories on the front line and at home of those who served and sacrificed. Our goal was to make this exhibit moving, especially meaningful to the community, and it involved so much, as Dan already mentioned, the conversations with veterans and their families, really pulling at our heartstrings in many cases. You'll see as you go through the exhibit some fascinating and interesting things that if we had not done this exhibit, you would not probably hear. Because sometimes those stories are hard to pull from people. And I encourage you all, as you go through this exhibit, as you experience today being Flag Day, and we all have this wonderful sense of community, that if you have stories in your own families, you try to draw them out as best you can and preserve them. It's something that unfortunately my family did not do, so I have to do a little research. It's a good thing I work in the history field. This exhibit really is due to a lot of people, not just our folks here today, but many people throughout the community, organizations, donors, excuse me. And I want to acknowledge some of those here before we go upstairs. Because somebody said to me one time, the most expensive way to teach history is through exhibits, but it's also the most compelling and most interesting way, because you'll see three-dimensional things matched up with stories. So, without further ado, I need to thank the folks who really made this possible. Gladfelter Insurance, Mr. and Mrs. Arthur J. Gladfelter. Those folks who helped many years ago in the initial collection, which is the Grumbacher Family Foundation and the Bonton Stores Foundation, the York Water Company, BAE, Eisenhower Club, the Hawking Gun Club, M&T Bank, Patty Stirk and Jeff Hines, Colony Papers, Memorial Hospital, Merrill Lynch, Graham Foundation, Buchart Horn, Prentice Dat, George M. Leader Family Foundation, William T. Morris, Webster McCormick, Dan Meckley, Charlie Snyder, and many, many, many more veterans who contributed 5 years ago all the way up to today. We are most grateful for those contributions. It allows us to collect and preserve and share what you see. There are many folks who, behind the scenes, gave other things, their time, their talent, loaned material to us. We had many, many interns cataloging each item that came into the collection. So as you look around the cases here and upstairs, every single piece is photographed and itemized and cared for in some way, and our interns help us do that. So we're most grateful to them for their time. To Bob Rudy for helping us with sound in the audio bells, which you'll hear upstairs. To Health Photo for the video that you'll see. To Dr. Kevin Brown for identifying a lot of our military ephemera. I especially want to thank our advisory panel. Ron Herman, you met earlier, Bob Caspier, Gordon Fryrick, Jeff Hines, Jim May, Rob McIlvain, Phil Palandro from the Veterans Department here at the county, Gene Schenk, Barry Shep, Charlie Snyder, Luther Sowers, Frank Spells, Tony Stabile, and Paul Wolfgang. Before this group, there was a group that started about 5 years ago with this initial effort. George Eiler, Murray Friedman, Bob Frisbee, Arthur Gladfelter, Jim Marsteller, Barry Shep, Tony Stabile, and Ron Webb. And we're most appreciative for them for leading this initial effort. Our exhibit team, especially Dean Krimmel for his direction, Dean's back in the back, his direction and script writing helped us pull together what you might imagine is a very, very big story. And if you think about filmmaking, there are always pieces that are left on the cutting room floor because there are too many stories to tell. Those stories, the cutting room floor stories, will actually be likely in the newspaper and blogged about and shown in different ways. So fear not, if you don't see things, we will try to make sure that they're seen in other ways. David Walsh, I'm not sure if David's here, but he had the artistic vision to take this very big picture and distill it down. If you think about it, there are 4 wars that we're interpreting in one room, and each war deserves its own room. But we are limited in space, and so we hope you like what we've done. Our exhibit team, those who took the ideas and made them real, Dennis Kunkel and Jeff Hewitt for their incredible carpentry work and fine finishing, Lila Foreman-Shaw, Director of Library and Archives, Jennifer Royer, Director of Collections and Exhibits, Dan Rowe, who you heard from, Director of Education, Cindy Brown, our Collections Manager, James Brennan, Assistant Director of Education. Behind the scenes, we had a little technology work to do because as you go through the exhibit, you will be able to see many of our collections online. There's a computer portion, so Gail Meyer, Emily Moore for fundraising, and our board members for their help. We encourage you to visit our partners who are here today, SOAR, Red Cross, Elks Club, Gold Star Mothers, Veterans Affairs, and Prospect Hill. We appreciate you supporting this event and the community. And most importantly, we thank our veterans who have loaned the materials to this exhibit. And I would like to get a photograph of those folks afterwards. In fact, probably the best thing to do is congregate over on the stairwell there. So anybody who's here as a veteran who's donated or a family member, we would love to have you come together and get a photograph if that's all right. We have an important role here at the Trust. We collect and preserve the things that are given to us. We care for them in perpetuity. And that takes time and energy, and we thank you for your patience in allowing us to do it well. So without further ado, I want to invite you upstairs to view Front Porch to Front Lines. Thank you all very, very much.
Good morning. My name is Lila Foreman-Shaw, and I'm the Director of Library and Archives at the York County Heritage Trust. We are located at 250 East Market Street in York. Our hours are 10 to 4, Tuesday through Saturday. And today we're taking a look at our new exhibit, Front Porch to Front Lines, York County Goes to War, which opened on June 14, 2011. Come in with me to the exhibit. You will see the Roll of Honor, which is a listing of 930 men and women that gave that ultimate sacrifice, that were killed in action during those 4 wars. This exhibit is not meant to provide a World War and military exhibit for those 4 wars, but more so to tell those personal stories of sacrifice and service pertaining to our York Countyans. Around the perimeter of the room, you will see information shown through artifacts, letters, photographs, and documents pertaining to the front lines, the men and women on those front lines. In the middle of the room, you will see stories pertaining to the front porch, how the people at home provided service and support to those soldiers. Let's proceed to the exhibit. Here we can see an image of soldiers getting ready, or individuals I should say, drafted men departing in September 1917, leaving here in downtown York. You'll also see examples of posters and other patriotic ideas and images pertaining to World War I. Here we see a portrait painted of Rodney Pollock, one of the individuals that unfortunately made that ultimate sacrifice during World War I, as well as a lovely reproduction of one of our World War I posters for the Victory Liberty Loan Project. This was one way that York Countyans participated, as well as nationwide, in raising money and such for the war effort. Over here, we see the home front of World War I. We see the activities of the American chain and all of the employees and their support. We see a wonderful banner for the National American War Mothers, the York chapter of that organization that began in 1917. In the corner, we see 2 images that are very much related with World War I. Trench warfare and gas mask. In many accounts, you always read of relatives that were gassed during World War I. Here we see a graphic image as well as an example of one of the gas masks in our collection. As we proceed around the room, you will see many exhibit cases filled with artifacts, helmets, uniforms, guns, shovels, boots, many of those things that went with the soldier to the front lines and that came home with them and shared their stories to us. As we proceed around the room, we see other examples of York County during World War I. A lovely image given to us by Robert Frisbee, illustrating, showing his father who served in World War I, as well as his uniform, gun, etc. As I mentioned, this exhibit is not meant to be a history lesson, primarily focusing on the national involvement of the United States during these 4 wars. But what we do have are timelines that give us perspective as to what was happening nationally and on the world during that time, keeping us in perspective as to how our York Countyans were involved. Here we see boots, a trench shovel, swords, and other artifacts donated to us for those soldiers in World War I. As you move around the room chronologically, we now move to World War II. We see the headlines, the Gazette and Daily, Japan declares war, December 8th, 1941. That's one of those dates that everyone that lived at that time, they always remember where they were when they heard the news of the bombing on Pearl Harbor. We see examples of uniforms, a flight jacket worn by Murray Friedman, who was a bombardier and navigator during World War II and completed 31 missions and returned home. We see the Marine jacket of Art Gladfelder and learn the wonderful story about him and his dog, Pal, and their service to the United States. As we move to the cases for World War II, we see many artifacts reflecting the service of our York Countyans, from General Jacob Devers, York's own 4-star general that served under Eisenhower and with Patton and all those other names that we have learned to recognize over the years. We see a photograph of Vonnie Grimes and learn the wonderful story with his dog tags and the good luck piece that is attached with it. He carried one half with him and the other half he left with his wife so he could bring them together when he returned home. On my right, we move to the front porch. We see the involvement of York and how it made national news with the beginnings of the York Plan, where we did what we could with what we had, where many of our industries converted their workforce and their equipment to items that could be beneficial to our soldiers overseas. We see an example of the Victory Loan Award, one of many awards that York County companies earned for their excellent service, and Army-Navy awards. Many of our stories are told not only with letters, but with the headlines. We saw the Gazette and Daily and a local news. Here we see an example of Stars and Stripes, a national or a military newspaper that was recorded, but this is a reproduction of a personal individual's copy. Harry McLaughlin, many York Countyans remember him with his column in the York Dispatch. And here he is noted, headlines are getting better day by day, and signed it Harry. This is what he kept in his collection. One of the most important things that we here at the Heritage Trust are charged with is the care and the stewardship of these items. And what we see on display is just a small portion of what we have. When you're dealing with 4 wars, you're talking about 45,000 soldiers that gave their service for the country, and to try to display all those stories in one small room like this is just not possible. But what we are charged with is the care of those items that have been given to us. In this area, we have 2 ways that we illustrate that. We have Kilroy. This is the retrofit, if you will, of a medical records storage unit made available to us, given to us from the VNA, a building close by that had relocated, and we converted it to use it for record storage. What the visitor will do is look up either a name or a particular artifact that they're interested in the index that's provided, and then enter that number of the shelf. This unit contains 18 shelves that will rotate and illustrates and shows us over 324 items in there. So let's see how it works. As you can see, it rotates and makes available 1 shelf at a time, and we'll stop at that designated shelf. And in the notebook, it will tell us on that particular shelf, in this case, shelf 3, it will tell us what's in these items. This particular shelf are all medals that were given to us when General Jacob Devers gave all of his personal papers and many of his effects to us. So all of these medals, etc., came to us through General Devers. For the items that we couldn't show in this exhibit, we have created a virtual exhibit. And what the visitor will do is click on the computer monitor, type in a last name or an artifact, hit the search button, and it will bring up examples of all the different items pertaining to an individual with the last name of Sheffer. Here, for example, is the hat that belonged to Chester Sheffer. This provides all the information about that item, when it was given to us, etc. A lot of this information, we're very blessed with the volunteers and the interns, college interns that we have, and they were very beneficial in entering all of this information. Next, we see our Worn with Pride wall. This is a wonderful array of 30 different jackets from all 4 wars, from as many branches of the service that we could provide, men and women. There is a panel located at the front of the exhibit with each uniform identified with a number, and then by looking at that particular key, you can see whose particular jacket that may be. As we proceed around the room, we have left World War I. We're now going to Korea. In this display case, we see many examples of the artifacts given to us pertaining to Korea. We see the heavy winter boots. That's one of the things that when talking to Korean War veterans, we always learn about the cold and the bitter weather that they encountered and the snow. And there's a prime example with this illustration, and you can see what kind of gloves they wore to stay warm and the boots that they wore. Here we have the exhibit team lovingly called this our phone booth, although there's no entrance. But what this panel does is shows home life during Korea, including an air raid siren that was located atop of the Yorktown Hotel that was given to us this past within the last few years. As we move through the room, we see more images and more objects pertaining to Korea. A raincoat, all of a foot-like locker containing all the items of Jack Knoll, another Korean War veteran, as well as the duffel bag of Paul Hershey. And finally, we move into Vietnam. Here we see the graphic examples of the choppers, one of the first things that many of us associate with Vietnam. There again, we have our timeline for each of these wars to give us perspective as to what was happening on the world front, so we as York Countyans connect with that. We see an example of all the items that Charles Shrum, a Vietnam veteran, sent home. A flakjack that was worn by Stan Brenner and is on loan for us. Here are more artifacts that we have been given or on loan pertaining to Vietnam, including a pair of Ho Chi Minh sandals that many will recognize, dog tags, your Army issue MREs and things of that nature, as well as examples of items that were sent home. That was one of the important things that soldiers looked forward to, was those letters from home and what they would send home. Most of the letters you think of as a printed letter. Here's an example of a silk parachute that one of our York Countyans rode home and rode around in a circle, and you can learn more about Skip Wills and his experience here. This particular exhibit is different for us, not only in the stories that we tell, but how we tell them. You will hear maybe in the background as you walk underneath one of our audio domes, two sections of stories containing oral histories and music of the time period. One of those domes has World War II, and the other one reflects the oral histories of two individuals that served during Vietnam. Finally, we have a touch screen where we have 3 different stories that are told. We have images from General Devers, one of his photo albums, and shows some of the activities during 1944, during World War II. We see the video of George Eiler, a Korean War veteran who had been wounded and was in a hospital in Japan. He will be filmed by the Navy. That film will be shipped back to New York City, where his parents here from York County rode the train up to New York and would reflect and would listen to the interview that they conducted with George, and then they will make phone contact. And you will see all of that as it was recorded on the Kate Smith Show. And finally, as we walk around the edge of the room, you will see a map that we've tried to identify as many of the different war memorials that different communities have placed throughout York County, and identifying those locations.
Hi, my name is Dan Rowe. I'm the Director of Education with the York County Heritage Trust, and currently we're inside our Front Porch to Front Lines York County Goes to War exhibit. In the center of the gallery, we have an interactive area called the Command Post. And we're inviting visitors to come into this area to explore a little bit more in detail some of the history about the 4 time periods we're focusing on here. So as you see, we have a sandbag display to create the post as it would potentially appear in the field. And on the desk, we have a variety of items from magazines, for example, a Life magazine from the 1940s that visitors are welcome to page through, as well as items out of our own archives. Some of the materials did not make it into the exhibit itself, so we thought we could augment the visitor experience by putting some of the letters home, for example, with transcriptions, making it easier for visitors to read. V-mail, for example, from World War II, we have here as well. In this corner, we have a footlocker from the World War II era, and we have some items or artifacts related to various time periods, again, World War I, Korea, World War I, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. So children, visitors alike can explore this area, look at some of these authentic artifacts from the time period to learn more about them. In this area, on the 3rd Saturday of each month throughout the exhibit's run, we'll have our Veteran Viewpoint program. So basically we'll have veterans manning the command post, and they will be able to interact with visitors, give them a little bit about their own service record and history, and really just have a dialogue with visitors as they come through. And so they can certainly assist visitors in learning about some of the materials on display here as well. In this area, we have a display case featuring some of the primary weapons from each time period. We have the M1 carbine featured here around the corner. We have the AR-15 rifle, very close to the M16 model used in Vietnam. And on the back side, we have the very well-known M1 Garand rifle, the primary weapon during World War II. Many of the American soldiers also carried that into combat during the Korean War as well. And along with the exhibit, we'll have a host of programming throughout the next year. The exhibit will run until September 11th, 2012. And between now and then, we'll have a lot of lectures talking about both the conflicts in a historical perspective, as well as some of the York County history and some of the local voices from veterans still with us today over the course of the year. We'll also have a movie series that will be held at the Strand Capitol Performing Arts Theater beginning on December 2nd, 2011. We'll be showing Tora, Tora, Tora. March 16th, we'll have Pork Chop Hill. And in May, beginning May 18th, All Quiet on the Western Front. And July 6th, 2012, Born on the 4th of July. All of our programs are listed on our website, yorkheritage.org, within the FPFL exhibit pages. We'll also have two programs this fall, starting with September 17th. We'll have a Vietnam veteran, Stan Brenner, talking about his personal experiences based on some of his published works, and Dr. Marilyn LaRue from Townsend University talking about the outbreak of the war and the politics involved with America's entry. Following in November, on November 19th, we'll have Richard Hoff. He is an artist who has focused on World War II and the home front. He'll be displaying some of his graphite pencil sketches, and he'll also be discussing some of the history related to the home front experience during World War II from the American perspective.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
I know what that one is. Good conduct. The yellow down the middle with the red. That's a good.
Well, that first one, that's my air medal. That's the one.
Which one?
The first one up there.
In the left side?
Right there, the orange and
Yep.
blue. That's
What's
my
that
air
one?
medal. That's my air medal.
Air medal.
And then.
Did you get anything for being a prisoner of war?
Yeah. This is.
Down here, it's me, my brother, my cousin, my father, my mother.
How old were you at that time?
15. They were 14. And those were our neighbors.